we have the empirical version of deriving knowledge, which comes from our senses, and we have this a priori method, which is it's more fundamental, right? Which, to your point, it's almost born of philosophy or part of philosophy, if we define philosophy as trying to get to the fundamental nature of things. But it's been largely disregarded by Keynesian economists. And, it's been, it almost, they like Mises said that economics is the youngest science. It's almost as if we've just recently in the arc of human history we've begun to understand that this method of deriving knowledge is more important to economics than Keynesian economics. And the analogy I like here is geometry, right? We know that Euclidean geometry has 5 axioms essentially from which all of its body of knowledge is derived. Economics, in the pure sense here, is sort of similar. We have like man must act, marginal utility of value, and things like this that we can derive many theorems from. Whereas Keynesian economics is suffering from more like the physics envy type thing that it seems like a lot of sciences suffer from, that they want super precise mathematical, empirically verifiable observations for everything to explain everything. And it's just not possible, actually. And there's a difference between physical and metaphysical, because it all comes down to the sense data versus deriving things from reason itself. So we know that mathematics is like the bedrock of civilization. And I think the awareness is dawning upon us is that economics is very close to that, and that it's derived from a priori knowledge. And then so he's using this platform, I guess, this bedrock of reasoning, to make the case largely about, specifically in chapter 1, the relationship between civilization and time preference. So saying that the aggregate reflection of time preference in the world is how civilized we are, and how different governance models, specifically democracy versus monarchy, affect or influence time preference. So I'll read, I think this chapter 1, man, the writing is superb, and he just gets straight to the point. So I'll read his opening paragraph. He says, in acting, an actor invariably aims to substitute a more satisfactory for a less satisfactory state of affairs, and thus demonstrates a preference for more rather than fewer goods. Moreover, he invariably considers when in the future his goals will be reached, i.e., the time necessary to accomplish them, as well as a good's duration of serviceability. Thus, he also demonstrates a universal preference for earlier over later goods, and for more over less durable ones. This is the phenomenon of time preference. So this very basic fundamental truth of living amid conditions of scarcity and having a finite life, from this bedrock that we all know and understand, he will reason forth about really, models of governance. So how do you, if he's explaining time preference in this way, is civilization just that? Is it just a reflection of aggregate time preference, in your opinion?
Well, it's the result of people having low time preference, right? Like, and it's you can almost like sense it, right? Like it's very obvious when you go to a city whether or not they have low or high time preference. So if you see graffiti everywhere, if you see rundown buildings, if you see, that's obviously high time preference. Like somebody like put a rock through the window or sprayed graffiti because they didn't care what the consequences would be or how the neighborhood would look or something like that. Whereas if you see something clean or, like some really nice classical architecture or building that's been there for a couple hundred years, that's immaculately maintained and things like that. In cities like, Paris or, some parts of London and things like that, you get the sense that this is civilization building, and it's the result of somebody that planned from a long time ago, because it takes a lot to build, say, a cathedral. Those were usually like 100, 200-year affairs, and it took the community that took a community, like most of that stuff was built on volunteer labor too, right? Like it took a community of people that were willing to forego even something good within their lifetime and build something that would last generations for their legacy. And that's that's extremely low time preference behavior, not even being able to reap within your own lifetime, but within the lifetime of your children and your children's children and so on. That is what builds up all of these things. What he's pointing to here is that as societies get higher time preference, there is a tendency to not build things that last, right? And this is what he calls, I think, decivilizing versus low time preference behavior, which is literally just building things that last longer, instead of building something just for now. And you could kind of see it, a lot right now, even in something like architecture, because a lot of homes just get destroyed after 20 years. They're out of style or something like that. They're built with cheap materials, sheetrock and wood and stuff like that, to make it very easy to tear down and build it back up again. Whereas if it's a cathedral, it's made out of stone. It's intricately carved. You have stained glass and all kinds of things that are very difficult to make, or at least they were at that time, and take hundreds of years for that reason. But it's going to last a long time. There are cathedrals in Europe that have lasted over 1,000 years, right? Like that's really lasting. That's civilization building. Whereas some of the stuff that's being built now is very high time preference. It's just for my lifetime. And, for some people, it's even much shorter than that. It's okay, whatever I'm going to do for the next couple of years. And, some of the most destructive people are, people that are very high time preference. I need the next hit of a drug or something like that. Right. And they're willing to go and smash windows and steal from other people and do all these things that, essentially destroy in order to satisfy their needs or wants for now. And that to me is the big difference between low time preference behavior and the high time preference behavior. Where I would disagree with Hapa a little bit is that there is sort of like a morality component to this that I don't think he quite really articulates. He might even agree with it, but I don't think he really articulates, which is that low time preference behavior is one aspect. That's what a Christian would call prudence, right? Like being wise about time and thinking ahead and doing something like that. But that's just one aspect. There are other aspects of virtue that also need to be present in order for civilization to really emerge. Those include stuff like justice and fortitude and temperance. So justice is like making sure that other people get treated fairly in whatever interaction. It's possible to be prudent, but not just, right? Like and in that case, it would also be kind of decivilizing. I believe the Chinese emperor that created the Great Wall of China, like he predicted 10,000 generations, but he treated everyone so badly that, the next generation, his dynasty got taken over, and he built something great, and it's lasted, but it's not. He didn't really build civilization per se because, they didn't really last. And the other virtues like these would be the cardinal virtues, fortitude and temperance, are also necessary. You can't just do. You need to do things the right amount, which is kind of part of prudence. And you need to also be courageous about doing some of that stuff, which we can definitely talk about. It's hard to build things without some courage. It's hard to be an entrepreneur or to start something, given all of the uncertainty of the future, without some courage. And that's what fortitude essentially is.
Yeah.